Hello and welcome to another episode of F1OWC Podcast Live. I'm your host, Dylan Anderson, three-time F1OWC World Champion, four-time I should say, joined once again by three-time World Champion Brandon Tanti. Welcome to tonight's podcast.
Thank you. Welcome everyone.
So, another week has gone in the fast-tracked Season 12 series. Obviously, another big week of on-track action. On and off the track, politics has been bigger than it's ever been. To be honest, to the guys that are listening in, you guys are aware of, what's been transpiring in the group chat and, what's been conducted on track over the last few rounds. We've got nothing scripted tonight. We've got no material. It's essentially Brandon and myself are going to have a discussion over, where we sit as, drivers and administrators in the series and our concerns and our thoughts moving forward into, the back end of Season 12. Now, we recently celebrated our 250th Grand Prix as a series. As I've mentioned a few times, dating back to the 24th of September 2013, with Trent and myself being the only drivers that raced in that era that are still on the grid today. Fortunately, that milestone aligned with Monaco, track that I hold in high regard. A lot of people sort of see that track as the pinnacle of motorsport in terms of commitment and challenge. Obviously this impressive milestone for our series was overshadowed by an overwhelming amount of incidents, penalty investigation, on track collisions, which I needed to, take some time away from the administration duties on the Sunday after the race, which I detailed in the last podcast, due to the foul taste that it kind of left. What should have been a weekend of celebration and acknowledgement for a series to be around 7 years and 250 Grand Prix and still have some of the original drivers there. That should have been at the forefront of, a lot of the drivers. With drivers edging, 80 to 100 Grand Prix, they'll at least hit it this season. We're with probably our most consistent group of drivers that we've had over the recent era. We've had fast people come in and you have people come and go, and that was the nature of it for a while. And then obviously myself, you, Brandon, Brian, hung around for consecutive seasons, and we had different people come on the grid. But I think from pretty much season 9, we've held pretty much the majority of drivers, which has been fantastic. For the most part, these drivers have been racing for 3-4 seasons together. Now, me personally, I can't think of many other esports series, Formula 1 related anyway, that would have pretty much the same group over consecutive seasons without considerable fallout in opinion, race etiquette, lack of administration, or for whatever reason. A lot of our drivers have come from experiences in other series, and that I've always acknowledged and respect that they've been able to compete in these other series. But going into Canada on the back of Monaco, as we pointed out before, Brandon and I's schedule for the week is quite tolling as administrators. For the working week, we start Tuesday. We've got the podcast, do the weather draft, and then we race. We've got to try and turn around review the incidents after the sprint race, turn the grid around in a timely manner. Sometimes those decisions are initially correct, and sometimes they may be open to appeal. Which Harry Ryan happened in Baku, when initially he was given a penalty for his contact with Shannon. That was appealed and that was overturned. In Canada, I was in a similar position. Initially, penalty was given out against myself. Later on, it was appealed and it was overturned. It's very, and then to basically need to turn around and classify all of the race footage and the race incidents and all of the comments and the statements and the politics after the Wednesday race. There's been nights where I've gone to bed and I've woken up and gone to work, and I'll do it after work. There's been some nights where I've gone overnight and I haven't slept, and I've done politics and tried to filter through everything to get it turned around, and I've gone straight into work the next day, the next morning, worked all day, come home, finalised everything for the league, and then essentially got on the console and raced the Thursday night race. Only to need to filter through it again after the sprint race, and then essentially go through the mess after the feature race. Now, for me, it's and for Brandon also, we're spending 3, 4, 5 hours of our time outside of the 1.5 hours racing each week at each track. Going through footage, trying to work out what penalty people should get, or if they should get a penalty at all, or if it's a racing incident. Turn that around and put it into a graphic. I think our graphics in the F1OWC, at least for race results, is at the forefront of Formula One esport racing. I know, and I take great pride in the fact that our race results screen looks better than the official F1 esports series graphics. Putting in our drivers' names, our country flags, our tyre compounds, colour coding everything to the winning driver. All that time, all that work takes time and effort and passion for the series, and to essentially, at least for Canada, turn everything around. And before France, and obviously we had the 2 Haas guys sitting out after what they'd essentially done to each other in Monaco. We turned around the results, and to try and do that before I could even do practice for France, cost me a lot of time practicing. Obviously yourself, Brandon, administrating and some of the decisions with me.
Yes.
It takes massive time away, not only from practicing in the series, but from your family, your personal life, and then to ultimately put out these graphics and the level of detail that we try and uphold in the F1OWC, to essentially put it into the group chat and go, hey, look, this is what's happened. These are the penalties that have been given out or not given out. These are the classified results. Now, and that should be how it is. That's what the administrators are trusted to do, is to administrate, and to essentially to have your hours of work and effort and debating over who should do what or what affects what or what should carry over, to essentially have that thrown back in your face by, witty remarks or smart-ass remarks, or, people looking for some good banter, or people that don't agree with the decision. And again, it comes back to what we say about, us policing the public forum, in the group chat and in your live streams. If you don't agree with something and you feel that there may be a conflict of interest, there may be some wrong decisions made, and you want to question that, or you want to get some more information regarding whatever it may be, addressing it in a smart ass witty way in the group chat is not the most proactive way to do it. We've said it before, and we've said it hundreds of times, that Brandon and myself are more than happy to speak to you guys individually, one-on-one, if you bring your concerns to us in private, and we can address it to you guys in private. Essentially, and we've stood by the fact that every single driver on the grid, whether, that be Ryan, Oscar, Mitchell, whoever, even Brandon and myself, everyone is entitled to appeal a penalty if there's cause to. That's not saying that you guys should just start throwing in appeals every time a decision's made, because the F1OWC administrators will always reserve the right to either accept or reject a penalty if there is deemed to be no cause. Having said that, if your penalty appeal is, not accepted, then it's for a reason based on our own experience racing with people and making these certain tough decisions as administrators. Ultimately, there was a lot of negativity towards Codemasters for their weather system, and look, I agree. I 100% agree. There are other racing simulator games out there that have a 100% better weather system in terms of making it dynamic. I know Project Cars is fantastic for it, but we have what we have, unfortunately, and whinging about it, whether that be in a group chat or in a stream, doesn't promote good promotional material for the series. Us complaining about the game isn't going to fix it. We have what we have. Hopefully, F1 2020 will address this. But for now, obviously, we can't do too much about it from an administration point. Now, obviously, the weather had changed quite quickly in qualifying. Now, I just want to quickly just note that Kurt had mentioned about the problem with the weather allocation for the race in practice, similar to what happened in Australia. As soon as I saw that, I pulled the pin at the end of practice, and we started a fresh lobby to make sure that the weather allocation was correct. Unlike what happened in Australia, where qualifying was allowed to play out, and then there was questions over setup. Okay, that was an administration decision that was made firmly, quickly, and everyone transitioned into the new lobby quickly, and we got under racing. I did a practice session with Shannon, as I'm sure everyone was doing practice sessions prior to the event, and I was doing intermediate running, and then I thought, I'll go out and do a lap. Shannon's like, no, it's not going to dry. It dried up on the last lap, but I missed the finish line by 3 seconds, and that was the end of my session. Come qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix, obviously, it was intermediate conditions. Ryan was sitting pretty good on P1 with his inter tyres. And Kurt, myself, Shannon elected to come out on the soft tyres with a minute 30 on the clock. Track's still wet. Steve comes out on intermediate tyres. Kurt lets me through and Shannon through, and then because Steve's on the intermediate tyres, he ends up passing all of us because he's got the grip. At this point, I felt that I wasn't going to make the finish line, which is, fair enough. And then we come into the hairpin. The track had dried up considerably. I'd caught Steve, and then the acceleration that I had out of the corner over him was more than what I'd thought, right? And at this point, I'd forgotten about the time to the checkered flag. I'd gone to go around Steve, and I just clipped him with my back wheel, right? I didn't feel anything on my stream. I didn't feel anything in my wheel. I carried on. I managed to cross the line with 1 second on the clock, right? Went on, obviously you guys know what happened. I got the pole position, everyone feels robbed, everyone's upset about the weather. I understand that. For me, I'm very happy. As my first pole position since 2017. It's a great day for me. It's a great day for Toro Rosso. Obviously I understand and I sympathise to everyone else in the series, but it's unlucky that that's how it played out. Now, as for the contact with Steve showed me the footage, and he didn't exactly say that he was submitting the footage against me. He just showed me. Now, I took that upon myself in that 10 to 15 minute window between the sessions to go, yeah, I clipped him, I got a penalty. Now, I initially miscalculated the gap between myself and Harry. So I thought the gap was 11 seconds behind, where it wasn't. It was only, a couple of tenths. And that's why the original post said that I'd carry the penalty into the feature race. Obviously, a few of you guys had questioned it in the public forum again, which is fine. And, upon further review, I said, yeah, okay, look, Harry's in a shot. If the penalty is served, I'll take it, I'll lose the podium. And if that's how it was, that's how it was. I'd lose the podium. But I thought, well, hang on, now that I've got time on my side, I want to go back and actually have a look at what happened in qualifying. Now, I'd crossed the line with 1 second to go. Now, at that time, I didn't know that. So essentially, I'd made contact with Steve, which, is as we know, is an offence. But I made contact with him, which caused him to, lose control, which he's tried to catch. But he's on intermediate tyres on a dry track, which are burning up. And as we know, those tyres go jelly, right? The fact is, and there's a few things that obviously I lodged an official appeal to Brandon, who then looked at it and consulted it with another person, completely independent to me. And as is Brandon's penalties that I, look over and investigate. Brandon has no interaction to his own incidents. I'm more than happy to penalise Brandon as he is to penalise myself. But as everyone on the grid is entitled to an appeal, I lodged an appeal. There was an investigation, and there was a few things that were taken into consideration. That, one, Steve hadn't set a lap in qualifying up to this point. It was, 17th and final minute of qualifying. So no lap set. He was on an out lap, right? He wasn't on a flying lap, and he was on intermediates on a dry track, and he wouldn't have reached the finish line to start that lap. So yes, I sympathise and apologise to Steve for that contact, but in no circumstances was that ever going to affect, improve, or change Steve's results in that qualifying session. And for me, I didn't feel it warranted a 10-second penalty. Now, obviously, that appeal was in the hands of Brandon and the other personnel, and they ultimately decided to overturn the penalty. Now, a lot of drivers didn't like the fact that, and I can see how it may look with a bit of backflipping on, he's getting a penalty in the feature, he's getting a penalty in the sprint, then he's appealed it, then it's taken away, or he's only done it to, keep his podium, And you know what? Yeah, I did. I appealed the penalty to keep my podium, as would anyone else have done. Essentially, if you're being robbed of a podium position due to an unjust penalty, whether that be corner cut, hitting someone that's spinning, safety car, whatever it may be, if that ends up affecting you a race win, a podium, you as a driver are going to appeal it. Whether that appeal is accepted or not, that's up to the administration team. But being put in a position where I'm made to look like I'm only, trying to look out for my own interests is not the case. Like I've made decisions against Shannon, I've made decisions against Ryan, I've made decisions against yourself, Brandon, and I've made it quite clear over the last few podcasts that, I don't care who or, what my penalties affect. We took podiums off of Fletcher. Just because I put in an appeal on my own penalty doesn't mean that I'm looking out, and I'm favouring the decision in my own, in my own way. That secondary investigation was done completely external to myself.
Well, I think the point here that we're making is that, there's a system that we have created that, is enforced to prevent, stewards abusing their powers, as a driver as well. And, in no way has that ever been the case. And like you've said, any review or any penalty or any footage that's presented against any of the members of the administration team are reviewed separately from the people who are involved, to negate any issues of bias, to keep it independent and free and fair, to everyone, on the grid. And that's essentially what we're trying to explain here. And as Dylan has described, I reviewed the penalty, or I took the review of his penalty, and that was in my hands, and obviously I took it to another external source, and we discussed that separately, and went through the detail, considered all the circumstances as a whole, and we deemed it to be unfair. I think it's unfair to hand out a 10-second penalty.
10 second, yeah.
A 10-second penalty to someone, when it wouldn't have impacted the result of qualifying in itself. And considering the strange circumstances that arose, from what appeared as Steve and Dylan were coming out of the hairpin, Steve looked to forfeit his position to Dylan, which obviously in turn Steve was then forfeiting his right to make it to the line in time, because obviously yourself, Dylan, made it to the line with only 1 second remaining on the right tyre compound, also considering the fact that Steve was on intermediate tyres. And the pace difference across those two tyres, it would have been theoretically impossible for Steve to make it to the line.
Even Shannon and Kurt were behind me on slick tyres as well, and they didn't make the line. But having said that, if Steve was on a hot lap, or if it was to be an impediment, or if it was under any other circumstance in qualifying or the race and that type of contact happened, then yeah, it would 100% carry a 10-second time penalty. As Steve picked up for impeding Harry in Bahrain. Obviously, impeding is a massive thing. Oscar had a few issues with it in Australia. So did I in Australia. Even though, Steve had half got out of, Harry's way in Bahrain, he still impeded him, he still carried the penalty. Now, the difference there was that Harry was on a lap and he was up on his delta at that time and lost a considerable amount of lap pace. And the difference here is that, in Canada, Steve hadn't set a lap, wasn't on a lap, and wasn't going to be able to start a lap, and he was on the wrong tyres. Moving on from that, there's been massive ongoing issues between Renault and McLaren. And I know, Brandon, I've spoken to you briefly outside of this podcast, and to be honest, I'm a little disgusted. It's a harsh word, but I'm going to use it. It's the better word, of all four of yous. Obviously yourself being decorated 3-time world champion, defending champion, reigning champion, etc., etc. You've found yourself front and center with some incidents with leading cars, which happen to be McLaren, and obviously you've picked up the penalties accordingly. Obviously Ryan Lowe feels that there may be some maybe some deliberate movements to your actions, and on obviously he wants justice for yourself taking out McLaren's consecutively. Now, I can see where he's coming from, but obviously we've had discussions externally that you feel that your season hasn't been as great as it has been, but reflecting on it from a completely neutral point, looking back at the incidents that you had with Oscar and that you've had with Ryan at Canada, the contact has been minimal. It hasn't been, Mitchell Hayward trying to dump Ben Matchett at swimming pool. It's been really, really, really tiny contact. Unfortunately, it's been at the point where the car in front has got steering input, and it's rotated the car, and with Oscar in Monaco losing positions, and obviously Ryan Lowe, massive contact at the scene of the crime from season 11. It's easy to see how some of these drivers may build up, that kind of opinion. Me personally, I've known you for a long time now. We've raced, over 120 races together, and I know that this is not in your nature, and I don't feel that it is deliberate. I think it's just unlucky. I think there's been a chain of reaction over the last, probably since Baku, where the McLaren and the Renault rivalry has really, really ramped up for the worst. I personally feel, now this is entirely my opinion, you can comment on it after, I think everyone in that top group, yourself, Kurt, Oscar, Ryan, Shannon, all just need to just calm the racing down a little bit. I know everyone is G'd up because the reverse grid is shorter, and obviously it's done straight after the sprint race. So if you have a shit sprint race, you're driving angry in the feature race. I get that, but to me, from an outside perspective, I don't think any of the top four drivers respect each other enough on the track to leave enough room to go hard racing, and that can be taken in two ways. The person that's constantly sending it down the inside into the corner, knowing that you're probably going to hit them and lose your own wing, and then you're going to go to the stewards and go, Brandon's turned in on me and he's wiped me out and I've spun out and I've lost positions, give Brandon penalty. You know, but then you can look at the other side of the coin and go, okay, even though the car in front's got the right of way, if you see in your mirrors that someone's throwing it down the inside, give them some space. You know, don't chop their wing off. It's as much of a disrespect as it is to the person throwing it down the inside. And I think that's where we're at now with the Renault and McLaren rivalry, that all four of yous are essentially throwing it down the inside of each other, and the person that's in front is shutting the door on each other, and yous are taking each other out. You know, yous are costing all of yous points. You know, Oscar is provisionally P2 in the championship. You know, the massive lead that you and Ryan have had has been wiped away due to silly, avoidable incidents. And unfortunately, it falls on, you know, the administrator's doorstep. Now, obviously, you've got the privilege of both being a driver and an administrator to try and review these incidents. Obviously, I'm reviewing the ones that you're in, but to try and be, you know, for the administrators to be presented as diplomatic as we can and unbiased as we can, given the consecutive amount of incidents that's happening between those four drivers, it really, really, really needs to stop. You know, I think the fast racing is good, but if you're taking each other out all the time because you're not giving each other enough respect and enough space on the track, then the pace and the speed and the racing's for nothing. You know, by putting it at the administrator's doorstep and spamming them with, you know, 20 videos of incident reviews of people throwing it down the inside and you know, turning in on them and like bumping each other down the straight, like, you just don't need it. Now, there's two sides of the coin with you know, what happened with you and Ryan in the feature race at Canada. You know, obviously Ryan retired from that race. I know you've messaged him and apologised, and I looked at the footage. I got a pretty good statement off of Ryan. Now again, you know, as an administrator, as a driver, I look at that footage and I see that Ryan has covered you off, but hasn't left a car's width to the edge of the track. At this point, you've had an overlap, there's been contact, Ryan's in the fence, Ryan's out of the race. Now, Ryan is claiming that he had the racing line, and you should have backed out of it. And essentially, you've wiped him out, and you've been aggressive, and he's trying to paint you out to be, you know, with this vendetta against McLaren. You know, and I can sympathise with him. I can see how that looks for him, and I can see how that looks for McLaren. You know, but at the end of the day, if the car's width was like, it wasn't, you guys weren't even halfway through the front straight yet, and you know, you guys had made contact. And essentially, it comes back to the statement that I just made beforehand, that there is not enough respect between both drivers in all the circumstances. Now, Ryan, knowing that you had penalties, and the fact that he, you know, appeared to have had a difficult Monaco Grand Prix and a very bad Spanish Grand Prix, there was no need for him to defend you that hard going down the front straight. That's me personally as an administrator, as a driver, former champion, whatever you want to call it. I think that level of defensiveness, whether or not you're in the wrong, it comes down to that statement, is that you guys are defending each other tooth and nail and essentially wiping each other out and leaving it for the administrators to pick up. And I'll like, Brandon, what's your thoughts on the incident with Ryan and McLaren?
Oh, just, you know, I think I want to go through a reflection as a whole. Obviously, you know, me personally as a driver, obviously, you know me a lot, but some of the guys, have been racing, from a more shorter period of time, may not know as much. Myself, me personally, I've always tried to take pride in the fact of, keeping it as clean but as fair as possible. You know, obviously the past few rounds have been difficult for me as a dealer. Obviously, there's been, like you said, incidents with McLarens, which obviously has come down to small mistakes that I've made, and honestly, they are honest mistakes. I've never took it upon myself to intentionally force someone off the track or take someone out in a manner, that would take them out of the race effectively. I've always prided myself on winning honestly, and beating someone fairly. That's what I take pride in. And the incidents, me myself reflecting on it, I'm not happy with it. I'm
No.
not happy with the fact that I've essentially caused incidents with two leaders of the race. Obviously Ryan, and then Oscar. Prior to that, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I'm not proud of it. Obviously they are small mistakes in braking zones, but I'm trying to do my best to try and rectify that. Obviously it doesn't make it right for the person who essentially lost a lot of points. But this is not something that I'm about. I'm not about taking people out. I'm not about that sort of way of going about racing. I've always tried to, and as you've seen in the past, I've kept it as fair and open as possible. Racing anyone, I respect everyone equally on track, because my belief is that when we get to the circuit, everyone is equal. We're all equals when we go on the circuit and we race, regardless of whether you start from P1 or at the back of the grid, P14, or even in the middle, P5. It doesn't matter. We're all equals. We go racing fairly. We're all here for the same reason.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that's something I take pride in. And the fact that this has happened, I refuse to accept that someone is, or in any circumstance that it may look to the outside that I'm doing that deliberately. I'm trying to do the best I can to race hard and fair. But the contact at Canada was, the first one was obviously my fault, and I accept that. That's completely my fault.
And you got the penalty for it.
That was my fault. I miscalculated the amount of speed I carried through the chicane. I thought that my belief that Ryan was picking up the speed a bit better than I judged, but obviously I misjudged that, and that was a miscalculation on my behalf, and the incident was a result of that. I copped a penalty for it, and I'm more than happy to do that. And every time I've done that, obviously I've submitted footage on my own behalf to show you without even the other guys submitting footage against me.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I will accept blame for that. But obviously, the feature race at Canada was very difficult. Obviously, I want to do the best I can, and keeping it respectful at the same time. I thought that there was an opportunity there. I saw the window of opportunity, and I took it. I thought that respectfully I was going to be given a car's width. Obviously, there wasn't. I was at the point where I was beside Ryan. I was beside him, and I felt like there should have been a car's width that was left, and obviously there wasn't, and the resulting, contact and retirement from his behalf. I don't take pride in that either. I don't want to win under those circumstances. It just, I really don't accept that the opinion that I do that intentionally. I refuse to accept it. It's a big part of why I go racing, is to keep it as respectful and open as possible. My belief is that if I finish a race and know that I've kept it respectful and clean as possible amongst everyone on the field, then I'm happy.
Mm.
regardless of the result. You know, I can walk away clean hands and know within myself that I've done the best I can and kept it, you know, and maintain respect within everyone, you know. And example of that was with, you know, in the feature race yesterday with Ben. You know, he wanted to, you know, dice and battle with me. I was completely open to that. You know, we had a small little battle there and lasted a few laps, you know, and it was good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know, because he had enough pace to keep with me, you know, and I was, you know, I spoke to him after the race and I, you know, encouraged him, you know, that he's doing well and that he should keep going with, you know, the amount of time and effort that he puts into it. But yeah, it's been very difficult, and especially when, you know, myself is in a situation where, like you as well, Dylan, that I'm not only a driver, I'm an admin as well, you know, and it's also something I take pride in, the fact that, you know, I want to represent the series the best way that I can, as you know, in the position that I find myself in.
Yeah.
You know, doing that respectfully and openly as possible. But you know, obviously, the drivers on the grid, you know, and I've noticed it, that there is a lack of respect, I believe, you know, amongst, you know, especially like you said, the McLaren and Renault drivers. Not only in McLaren guilty of that, you know, my teammate as well. You know, I believe that he has a part to play in it. You know, there's, you know, and these things carry over to the next race. It's not just something that's isolated to one, you know, to one race. Obviously, now that we have back-to-back, you know, races on the one night, we're finding a situation in ourselves where, you know, someone may become, you know, in a, you know, in a way that they have a bad sprint race, so they're carrying that frustration and want to, you know, to do even better in the feature race and you know, carrying that frustration with them, which is causing, yeah, it's affecting the way that, you know, the way that we're driving and the way that everyone's driving, you know. And I think not only myself and yourself, I think others can see that as well. I don't think it's just isolated to what we can see. You know, and the incidents and outcomes of penalties show that.
Well, I think, you know, like, it's comparing to season 11, obviously, you know, having a 2-day format for each race, you know, gave people, if they had a bad sprint race, gave them at least, you know, the night and the day to sort of pull it together and come back fresh mind for the feature race. And then ultimately, you know, the reverse grid races are longer, so there's less urgency to plough through the field. Yeah, and again, as you said, you know, that respect with, you know, between you guys and not just McLaren and Renault, but I think everyone up and down the grid needs to just, you know, just have a small moment to reflect why we're here and why we go racing.
Well, this, you know, this works if everyone plays a part in it. You know, it's not just one or two people. Everyone's got to participate to maintain that respect. You know, otherwise, you know, like you know, you've said, Dylan, we find ourselves in a position where we are just inundated with you know, messages, footage, you know, things, you know, people arguing over, you know, whether or not someone should get a penalty, you know, putting their opinion forward. It's getting to a situation where we're noticing that lack of respect, and it's just, you know, we hope that, you know, drivers can, you know, in a way sort out their dealings on track, you know, compete hard but fair, but not, you know, take it constantly to the steward's room to ask for things to be set right there, you know, after you've decided you've wanted to, you know, force someone off the track, or, you know, not leave room, or, you know, try and send it down the inside, or, you know, chopping someone off. You know, it just doesn't work, you know, for us.
And then, you
for
know,
everyone.
then essentially to, you know, to debate and disagree in a public forum with the decisions that we have had to make. Obviously, it's not isolated to the one incident. There are multiple things that need to be taken into consideration when taking incident reviews into consideration. Ultimately, what happened with Ryan and Kurt, the back straight at France. Yes, okay, did Kurt come over and squeeze Ryan? Yes. Ryan saying that, that they've bashed wheels going down the straight. Kurt saying that Ryan's hit him. They get down into the chicane and, they both hit each other and they all lost out to yourself and Shannon. And again, it just highlights the fact that, that lack of respect to each other is, undoing everyone's championships. Now, all of the points that Kurt's worked so hard to rebuild after China, could potentially have been thrown away. Either through penalties, either through retirement. Essentially that's where we're at. And ultimately, guys, we're at a crossroads here. And I see one or two ways that we can move forward as a series and as an administration team. Alright? We can either all take a moment to go, hey, look, the racing is really fast, everyone's competitive, it's clean for the most part, but we need to give each other a little bit more respect on track. Minimise the amount of footage that's going to the stewards. Everyone gets back to good racing, and we can progress. We finish off season 12. We have a 1-2 month break until the F1 2020 game comes out, and then we can go back to doing the one race a week format from season 11, because I really feel that season 11 format was fantastic. Right? So we can either A, work through it really constructively as a group for a positive outcome. The only other alternative is we stop administrating. And essentially, we will have what we had for the back end of Season 10, where the result is the result. There'll be no investigations. If you get crashed out at Turn 1 and you feel hard done by, that's it. There's no justification, there's no justice for you. There's no penalty for the other guy. And I guarantee, with the current competitive grid that we have now, the whole F1OWC series will collapse within the week the moment there is no administration and no penalties for reckless driving. And everyone on the grid, you, me, Ryan, Kurt, Oscar, Austin, Mitchell, everyone on the grid has their own part to play in moving this series forward from this point. Because, we can't continue to have the high level of, investigations coming through for silly incidents. We shouldn't be giving out 10-second penalties because someone's decided to throw it down the inside and someone's decided to go, nah, stuff you, and shut the door on them. Prime example of that is at the final corner in the sprint race with Ryan at the Waller Champion chicane. Now, Ryan has come alongside me and, made the impression that he was going to go down the inside. Now, me as a driver, being the one that's been, overtaken or attacked, I had two decisions to make there. One, I've gone, nah, stuff you, mate. I'm turning in, taking the racing line. Chop his wing off, spin him around. I carry on. I get a good race, and then I lose that good finish on penalties. Or, I do what I did, and left him enough apex room for us to both go through the corner. I went on to get onto the podium. It was a great day for me. And then that's where I feel that a lot of people need to just self-analyze the way that they attack and defend. You know, if
Well,
if someone's throwing it down the inside, the person that's been overtaken's got one or two, two decisions. You shut the door on them, damage the other car, spin them, potentially spin yourself, and then that car carries on, gets a good race, and then you lose that good position on penalties. Or you give the car a little bit of space, you guys go side by side, and you carry on. Whether or not you retain the position or not is irrelevant. The fact that you haven't wiped each other out, and you haven't forced the administrators to give, either or both of you penalties, is a good day. And the problem is that all of this, administration and accusation of being biased and, looking out for your own interests, has overshadowed the fact that, one, the French feature race is my 250th Grand Prix as a driver, and to cop the bombardment we did prior to that race left a really, 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 really sour taste in my mouth. The fact that, I've committed 7 years to this series, I've administrated it for nearly as long, and then on my milestone race, I basically get preached to say that I'm, biased, I'm only looking out for myself, and etc, etc. That overshadowed the whole round for me, as it did for the series in Monaco with their, with the series 250th race. And another thing that was overshadowed, the fact that Ben come out of his race ban after Monaco, qualified mid-pack, and finished both races mid-pack. Like, he had a fantastic race. Like, if you could ever try and detail a better return to racing after a race ban, he's done it. But no one cares about that. They're all hung up in their own stuff, of trying to get, Brandon penalties and Ryan penalties and Kurt penalties and Shannon penalties. You're too busy hung up on your own personal agendas and not looking at the bigger picture as a series. And,
yeah. Well, one of the, points I want to make, and I think resonate with everyone here, is, think to yourself, how do you like, battling, as a driver? How do you like to be respected on track? And pay that respect to the next person based on how you feel like you should be respected, on track. This is something that, all of us need to think about. How do we like to go racing? Yes, over the past few weeks it's been hard. A lot of it's been, quite fair, but at the same time, it's, there's been an upward trend that, has been pretty problematic, for the most part. Not only involving myself, but many of the other drivers on the grid. How do you like to be respected on track? And maybe think about, taking that sort of respect and paying it to the next person.
Well, essentially, as I spoke to Ryan about, the overtake and the battle that we had in Canada, and I told him, I said I had two options. It was either shut the door on you and spin you, or give you space and go racing. And I chose to give him space and go racing. And I've done that with a lot of drivers. I did it with Austin at Turn 1 in France. I did it with Oscar at the last corner at France. And I said to Ryan, and I've also said to Shannon, it is, can be considered a weakness in my racecraft that I give so much room. But at the same time, to me, it's not worth the damage or the penalty. I've only broken 3 front wings in a race this season. We're up to round 9. The consistency and the respect to the other competitors, I hold really strong. Now, we go into Canada, I shut the door on Ryan, spin him around, then I've lost that credibility as a driver. And, next time I'm trying to go up the inside of Ryan, is he going to shut the door on me, or is he going to leave me space? And that's the problem with, the Renault and the McLaren battle. Ryan has appeared to, squeeze you on the front straight. Unfortunately, put himself and you in the wall and him out of the race. Now the roles, reversed in France with Kurt squeezing Ryan, and ultimately ending up in contact. There's no need for it. You can defend, but there's no need to run that aggressive. And like I said, you either, there's two ways we can go about this. We can either all work together and find a resolution and move forward positively, or we don't administrate penalties anymore, and the result will be the result. But like I detailed before, the moment we stop doing that, then the series integrity will collapse and people will lose interest in it, and because they feel hard done by it and there's no justice for them being tanked out of the race, it can get really, really messy pretty quickly. But look, I think we've explained what we needed to explain. Ultimately, we're here doing the best that we can. As I quite bluntly said in the group chat, that if some of the drivers feel that they can host and administrate the series more consistently and better than Brandon and myself, I'm open to applications. And over the last few weeks, I know, Brandon, you agree with me in that statement, that the level of toxicness has grown, and I think partial is to the season 12 format and the fact that we've got 2 races in one night, we've got 3 races very close to each other. That's why I'm looking forward to having this weekend off. I think for everyone just to have a breather, everyone chill out, do some other stuff, dress up in banana suits and drive trucks. I'm looking forward to Austria, and I really hope that we can all, return and go racing, and we can all grow and take something from the comments that Brandon and myself have laid forward. Now, again, it's purely just our opinion. The real change on track is purely down to the individual. If Ryan doesn't want to be taken out and doesn't want to be defended heavily, don't defend other people. The same with Kurt. If Kurt doesn't want to wheel bash with people down the straight, don't wheel bash with people in return. It's as simple as that. We spoke to the Haas guys and we said, look, in Austria, you're there racing for each other. There's no need for you guys to constantly be on attack with each other. We can go racing without needing the tsunami of bloody politics. As much as I love it, it's getting out of hand. Any final words, Brandon?
I think the series doesn't operate unless we all contribute. Obviously you and I, we contribute more as we're in the position, to do so. However, still, even on that point, a series doesn't run without drivers, but at the same time, a series can't run without respect.
100%.
And if we don't all show that respect to each other, we lead ourselves down a very dangerous path.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate to see that. I really don't want to see it.
No. I don't think anyone on the grid wants to see this series fall apart. Our attendance has been phenomenal this season. Everyone's been there. Everyone's raced really well. The pace is good. The competition is great. But there is a few blemishes on what is a really aesthetically perfect series. Our racecraft, for the most part, is night and day to what we see, being streamed on social medias through, more high-profile series. And, it's, I really feel that, we can move forward with it. But, everyone needs to come to the table. You know, if you've got 4 or 5 drivers going, yeah, look, I'm going to take it easy, and then you've got, you know, one guy engaging hero mode and just sending everyone, then all of a sudden those 4 or 5 people aren't going to be taking it easy anymore. Essentially, where's the stop?
That's right.
Right, guys, thanks for tuning in for episode 8 of F1OWC Podcast Live. Very interested in hearing your feedback. Obviously, if it's, you know, going to be controversial, and you know if it will when you're writing it, keep it out of the group chat. We're all adults. We don't need to be lectured on what does and doesn't need to go into the group chat. Thanks for tuning in, Brandon. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys on Tuesday.